The orbital station Bethlehem's Rest hung in the void like a forgotten ornament, its hull scarred by 3 decades of Imperial bombardment. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold viewport, watching enemy dreadnoughts form their blockade pattern around Earth's last free colony. The blue glow of the planet below seemed dimmer today, as if the very light was being drained from the world. "Ma'am, we're receiving another transmission from the Imperial flagship." Lieutenant Morrison's voice cracked slightly. At 19, he was too young to remember Christmas. Too young to understand why they were all about to die for something as simple as keeping a light burning. Sarah turned from the viewport, her weathered face catching the soft illumination from the station's artificial star. The device hummed quietly in the center of their observation deck, a perfect replica of Earth's ancient sun, created by humanity's greatest scientists before the Empire had silenced them forever. It was the last Christmas star in existence, and Emperor Vexthul wanted it extinguished. "Put him through," Sarah commanded, straightening her uniform. The fabric bore patches from a dozen different colonies, worlds that had once celebrated the human tradition of hope in darkness, worlds now turned to ash and memory. The holographic projection materialized with imperial grandeur. Emperor Vexthul stood 12 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton catching and fracturing the light into prismatic rainbows. 4 arms gestured with practiced authority while his compound eyes fixed on Sarah with the cold calculation of a predator studying wounded prey. "Human commander." His voice resonated through their translation systems, each word dripping with contempt. "This is your final opportunity to demonstrate wisdom. Surrender the station and extinguish that offensive light. Your species' primitive death cult ritual has been banned throughout civilized space for 37 cycles. No more Christmas. This is not a request." Sarah stepped closer to the projection, close enough that she could see her reflection distorted in his multifaceted eyes. Around her, the bridge crew maintained their positions with the steady determination of people who had already accepted their fate. They were the last guardians of something the Empire could never understand. "With respect, Your Excellence," Sarah's voice carried across the comm with quiet steel. "That light stays on." The Emperor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or annoyance. "You would die for this meaningless tradition? Your Christmas is nothing but superstition wrapped in colored lights and false hope. It serves no practical purpose, generates no profit, advances no tactical advantage. Why do humans cling to such useless ceremonies?" "Because," Sarah said, her hand moving to rest on the small silver cross at her throat, "some things are worth preserving, not because they're useful, but because they're beautiful. Because they remind us who we are when everything else is stripped away." She gestured toward the artificial star, its warm radiance filling the chamber with gentle gold. "This light is burned on every human world for over 2,000 years. It represents the idea that even in the darkest times, even when hope seems impossible, something beautiful can still exist, something worth protecting." "Philosophical nonsense," Vexthul hissed. "Your Christmas celebrations caused productivity drops across 17 sectors. Your gift-giving traditions disrupted trade networks. Your emphasis on family gatherings interfered with mandatory work rotations. The Empire requires efficiency, Commander. Order. Your holiday represents chaos." Sarah's crew exchanged glances. They had all heard the stories from the outer colonies, worlds where imperial efficiency had replaced human culture with cold productivity. Places where children were assigned to work details instead of schools, where art was considered resource waste, where the simple act of gathering to share a meal was classified as unauthorized assembly. "The Empire might call it chaos," Sarah replied, "but we call it being human." The Emperor's forearms spread wide in a gesture of imperial authority. "Then humanity has chosen extinction. Very well. You have 1 standard hour to evacuate non-essential personnel. After that, this station will be reduced to component atoms." The projection flickered and died, leaving them in the gentle glow of their artificial star. For a moment, nobody spoke. The weight of their situation settled over the bridge like a shroud.
300 souls aboard the station, facing a fleet that could glass planets. "Orders, ma'am?"
Lieutenant Morrison asked, his young voice steady despite everything.
Sarah turned to face her crew, these brave men and women who had volunteered to make this last stand. They came from every human world, every walk of life, united by the simple belief that some things were too precious to surrender. "All non-essential personnel report to evacuation pods," she announced. "That's anyone not absolutely critical to station operations." "Dr. Reeves, how long can we maintain the star if we're running on minimum power?" The elderly scientist adjusted his thick glasses, his lined face creased with concentration. with the main reactor focused solely on the light array, perhaps 12 hours. Maybe 14 if we shut down life support to everything except the command deck. Do it. Sarah's decision came without hesitation. Get our people to safety, but that light doesn't go dark. Not while we're still breathing. The next hour passed in controlled chaos. Evacuation pods launched in waves, carrying civilians, support staff, and anyone whose sacrifice wouldn't directly contribute to their final mission. Sarah watched each pod disappear into the void, carrying pieces of humanity's future away from the coming storm. Dr. Chen, her younger brother, and the station's chief engineer approached with a datapad clutched in his weathered hands. Sarah, I've been running calculations. If we reroute power from the defensive shields, we might be able to boost the star's output significantly. Make it visible from Earth's surface. For how long? Maybe 6 hours. 7 at most. But without shields, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah nodded grimly. Do it. If we're going out, let's make sure they see us down there. Let them know the light didn't die quietly. As the evacuation concluded, 47 souls remained aboard Bethlehem's Rest. They were the absolute minimum crew needed to maintain the star and keep the station operational. Each had volunteered. Each understood they would not see another sunrise. The Imperial fleet began moving into attack formation, their massive dreadnoughts positioning themselves for maximum destructive efficiency. Sarah counted 37 capital ships, enough firepower to sterilize a solar system, all focused on their small station and its gentle light. Ma'am, Communications Officer Torres called out, "We're receiving transmissions from Earth's surface, thousands of them. Put them through." The bridge filled with voices speaking dozens of languages but all carrying the same message. From hidden bunkers and underground cities, from the scattered remnants of humanity's homeworld, people were singing. Christmas carols drifted through space, carrying across the void to reach them in their final hour. Silent Night, in Mandarin from the Beijing underground. O come, all ye faithful, in Spanish from the Mexican resistance. The first Noel in English from what remained of London. Voices from every corner of Earth, raised in defiance of the empire that had tried to silence them. Lieutenant Morrison wiped tears from his young eyes. They can see us, can't they? The star? Sarah nodded, watching the tactical display as their boosted light created a visible beacon in Earth's sky. For the first time in 30 years, Christmas had returned to the human homeworld, even if only for a few precious hours. All stations report ready, ma'am, her brother called from his engineering station. Power at maximum. The star is burning as bright as we can make it. The Imperial fleet completed its formation, weapons charging with deadly purpose. Sarah took her position in the command chair, surrounded by her chosen family of defenders. Each face showed fear, yes, but also something the Empire had never understood. The quiet joy of standing for something greater than themselves. Open a channel to the Imperial flagship, Sarah ordered. Emperor Vexthal's image appeared once more, his crystalline features reflecting satisfaction at their approaching victory. Have you finally developed wisdom, human? I have a message for you, Your Excellence, Sarah said, rising from her chair. And for every world under Imperial rule. Some things can't be conquered, some lights can't be extinguished, and some gifts are too precious to surrender. She gestured to the star burning behind her, its radiance filling the bridge with warmth and hope. This is our gift to the universe. Not just the light itself, but what it represents. The idea that beauty matters, that joy matters, that love matters more than efficiency or profit or control. Meaningless sentiment, the Emperor snarled. Prepare to witness the price of defiance. Perhaps, Sarah replied with a sad smile. But you'll never truly win, will you? Because every time you see light in darkness, every time someone chooses hope over despair, every time two beings find connection instead of conquest, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that humanity chose to die rather than let our light go dark. The connection terminated. Around them, the Imperial fleet unleashed its fury, waves of energy weapons converging on their small station. The first impact sent shudders through the hull, alarms blaring as systems began to fail. But the star continued to shine, its light streaming across space toward Earth and beyond, carrying with it the final gift of humanity's Christmas. Proof that some things are worth any sacrifice, and that love in the end is stronger than hate. All stations, this is Commander Chen. Sarah spoke into the comm as explosions rocked the station around them. It has been the highest honor of my life to serve with you. The light is our legacy. Let it burn bright. The artificial star pulsed once, twice, then blazed with the fury of a newborn sun, sending its radiance racing across the galaxy at the speed of light. In that moment, as the station began to break apart around them, Sarah felt something the Empire would never understand: perfect peace, knowing they had kept faith with something beautiful in an ugly universe. And on Earth below, in bunkers and hidden shelters, children who had never seen Christmas pressed their faces to makeshift windows and watched the most beautiful star they had ever seen burn against the darkness, carrying with it the promise that somewhere in the cold void, love still mattered more than power. The light raced outward toward distant stars and sleeping worlds, carrying its message across the galaxy. Some things are worth dying for, and sometimes, in the darkest hour, hope chooses to make its stand. The shockwave from Bethlehem's Rest reached the Outer Rim territories 17 days after Commander Chen made her final stand. Captain Marcus Webb felt it first as a tremor in his coffee cup aboard the mining vessel Shepherd Star. Then as something far more profound when his long-range sensors detected the impossible readings coming from Earth's direction. "Captain, you need to see this." Chief Navigator Yuki Tanaka called from her station, her voice tight with disbelief. The bridge of their converted cargo hauler was cramped and functional, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. But today, the utilitarian space felt somehow different, charged with an energy that made the artificial lights seem brighter. Marcus set down his mug and moved to the sensor array, his weathered hands still bearing the calluses of a man who had once worked the asteroid mines himself. At 53, he was old enough to remember fragments of Christmas from his childhood on Kepler 442b, before the Imperial Reformation had outlawed such gatherings, old enough to know what the readings on his screen truly meant. "That's impossible," he whispered, staring at the energy signature streaming past their position. The wavelength pattern was unmistakable: artificial stellar light, the kind generated by humanity's old Christmas stars. But those had all been destroyed decades ago. "Where is this coming from?" "Best estimate, Sol System," Tanaka replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. "The signal originated approximately 17 days ago, which matches the travel time for light from Earth to our current position." Around them, the bridge crew gathered to witness the impossible. These were hardened miners and freight haulers, people who had spent their lives in the cold vacuum between stars, yet every face showed the same wonder that comes from seeing a miracle manifest in the darkness. "Sir," Communications Officer Hendricks spoke up, his voice hushed with reverence. "I'm picking up secondary transmissions, coded on the same wavelength." "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, then resolved into a voice they would never forget. Commander Sarah Chen's final transmission, broadcast on the same frequency as the stellar light, racing across the galaxy at light speed. "To all human ships, stations, and settlements receiving this signal, the light is our legacy. Let it burn bright. Christmas is not dead while we remember what it means. Hope is not lost while one star still shines. Love is not conquered while we choose to stand together." Silence filled the bridge as the message repeated, transmitted over and over in a dozen human languages. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 30 years, the warm sensation of coming home, even while drifting in the cold void between worlds. "Captain," Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez climbed up from the lower decks, her coverall stained with coolant and her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, the crew's asking questions. "Some of the older miners are talking about Christmas like they remember it. What do we tell them?" Marcus looked around at his crew. 23 souls from 7 different human colonies, united by the hard work of keeping their small operation running in the Outer Rim. They had never celebrated Christmas together, had barely acknowledged its existence. The Empire had been thorough in its cultural suppression. But now, watching that impossible light stream past their ship, Marcus felt something awakening in his chest that he had thought dead forever. "Gather everyone in the mess hall," he ordered. "All hands, including the night shift. We need to talk." 20 minutes later, the crew of Shepherd Star crowded into their small dining area. The room normally felt adequate for their needs, but with everyone present, it became intimate, almost familial. Marcus stood at the head of their single table, looking into faces that ranged from teenagers to grey-haired veterans of the mining colonies. "How many of you remember Christmas?" he asked. A few hands rose tentatively. Old Pete, who had worked the ice mines of Europa before the Empire banned seasonal celebrations. Sophia Kowalski, who still wore a small cross hidden beneath her work clothes. Thomas Chen, no relation to the commander, despite the shared surname, who had been born on New Bethlehem before its cultural purification. "Tell them, Pete," Marcus encouraged. The elderly miner cleared his throat, his pale eyes distant with memory. Christmas was... It was about light in the darkness. We'd work 18-hour shifts in the ice caves, never seeing real sunlight for months at a time. But on Christmas, we'd gather in the common areas and someone would bring out these little artificial suns, stars we called them. Just small ones, nothing like the big station arrays. He paused, his voice growing stronger. We'd share whatever food we had, even if it was just protein paste and recycled water. We'd tell stories about Earth, about the old traditions, about how people used to give gifts not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because making someone else happy made you happy too. The Empire said it was inefficient, Sophia added quietly. Said that gatherings like that disrupted work schedules, promoted individualism over collective productivity. They said Christmas made people soft, made them think about things other than their duties. Marcus nodded grimly. And now we know what someone died to protect. He gestured toward the viewport where the stellar light continued streaming past. Commander Chen and her crew chose to die rather than let that light go out. They chose to make sure the universe remembered what we used to be. Young Maria Santos, barely 18 and on her first tour beyond the inner colonies, raised her hand hesitantly. Captain, I don't understand. What's so special about one day? About lights and gifts and whatever Christmas was supposed to be? The question hung in the air, and Marcus realized that for many of his crew, this moment represented their first exposure to concepts that had once defined human culture. How do you explain joy to someone raised in a world designed around pure efficiency? Christmas, he said slowly, was never really about one day. It was about remembering that we're more than just workers or soldiers or whatever role the system assigns us. It was about choosing to care for each other even when nobody makes us. About finding beauty in simple things. About believing that tomorrow could be better than today. He looked around the room, seeing understanding begin to dawn in several faces. The Empire feared it because it taught people to value things that can't be quantified. Love, hope, wonder. The idea that we have worth beyond our productivity ratings. Thomas Chen spoke up from the back of the room. My grandmother used to tell stories about the Christmas markets on New Bethlehem. She said people would spend weeks creating gifts for each other. Not expensive things, just small tokens made with their own hands. Art pieces, carved toys, poems written on real paper. The Empire called it waste because the gifts served no practical function. But they weren't meant to be practical, Sophia added with growing enthusiasm. They were meant to say, I was thinking of you. You matter to me. Your happiness is worth my time and effort. Marcus felt the energy in the room shift, saw his crew beginning to connect with something they had never experienced but somehow recognized in their hearts. These were good people. He had handpicked each one for their skills, yes, but also for their character. They had the capacity for the kind of love that Christmas represented. They had simply never been given permission to express it. Sir, Engineer Martinez said thoughtfully, we're carrying a cargo of rare earth elements to the Arctura station. Titanium, platinum, some crystalline matrices that could be used for, well, for making lights. Marcus felt a slow smile spread across his face. What are you thinking, Rosa? I'm thinking, she replied with matching grin, that it would be a shame to waste this opportunity. That stellar light is going to be visible for hours yet. Maybe we should commemorate the occasion? The idea took hold like wildfire. Within minutes, his crew was buzzing with plans and possibilities. Chief Navigator Tanaka suggested they could adjust course slightly, following the light's path toward the inner colonies. Communications Officer Hendricks proposed broadcasting their own message, adding their voices to Commander Chen's legacy. But it was young Maria who made the suggestion that changed everything. What if we made Christmas stars of our own, she asked, her eyes bright with sudden inspiration. Small ones, like Pete described. We have the materials, we have the fabrication equipment. We could create enough for everyone aboard, and maybe for other ships too? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were talking about openly defying imperial law, about reviving a banned cultural practice. The punishment for such actions was severe. Imprisonment, exile to the Outer Rim, possibly death. But Marcus looked around at his crew and saw something he had never expected. Unanimous determination. They had witnessed something miraculous tonight, had heard the voice of a hero calling across the void, and they wanted to answer. All right, he said quietly, and the room leaned forward to hear him. Here's what we're going to do. Rosa, you and your team start working on the star designs. Keep them small, portable, something that can be hidden if necessary. Yuki, I want you plotting a course that takes us past every human settlement in this sector. We're going to spread the light." He paused, looking each crew member in the eye. "But understand what we're choosing here. Once we start this, there's no going back. The Empire will classify us as cultural terrorists. We'll be hunted, blacklisted, possibly killed. Anyone who wants to transfer to a different ship at our next port, I'll understand completely." Not a single person moved toward the door. Old Pete stood up slowly, his aged frame straightened with purpose. "Captain, I haven't felt this alive in 30 years. "Come in," Sophia nodded firmly. "My grandmother died in an imperial re-education camp for teaching children Christmas carols. It's time her sacrifice meant something." One by one, every crew member voiced their commitment. These miners and engineers and navigators, these ordinary people living ordinary lives in the cold between stars, had found something worth risking everything for. Over the next 6 hours, as the stellar light from Bethlehem's Rest continued streaming past their ship, the crew of Shepherd Star worked with a purpose none of them had ever experienced. Rose's engineering team fabricated small but brilliant stellar arrays, each one capable of burning for weeks on a single power cell. Tanaka calculated routes that would take them to a dozen different human settlements. Hendricks prepared communication packages to accompany each star, recordings of the old Christmas carols, stories about the holiday's meaning, and most importantly, Commander Chen's final message. As their first artificial Christmas star came online in the fabrication bay, filling the workspace with warm golden light, Marcus felt tears on his cheeks. He hadn't cried in 20 years. But something about that gentle radiance broke through the armor he had built around his heart. "It's beautiful," Maria whispered beside him, her young face illuminated by the glow. "It really is just about the light, isn't it? About choosing to make something beautiful when everything else is dark." Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. Around them, his crew gathered to witness their small miracle, a Christmas star born in the hold of a mining vessel, created by people who had never celebrated Christmas but understood its meaning in their bones. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "we start delivering these to every human settlement we can reach. We're going to reignite Christmas across the galaxy, one star at a time." The stellar light from Bethlehem's Rest continued streaming past their ship, carrying Commander Chen's final message toward distant suns. But now it was no longer traveling alone. From the converted cargo hold of Shepherd Star, new lights began to kindle, preparing to spread across the outer rim like seeds of hope scattered in fertile darkness. The Empire had thought Christmas dead. They were about to learn that some things cannot be killed. They can only grow stronger in the attempt. Admiral Zektar of the 3rd Imperial Fleet received the first reports 3 months after the Bethlehem's Rest incident. Her crystalline command chamber aboard the Dreadnought Absolute Order hummed with the efficient activity of a perfectly managed military operation, but the data streams flowing across her tactical displays showed anything but order in the Outer Rim territories. Unauthorized stellar emissions detected in 17 different systems, her intelligence officer reported, his forearms working multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Energy signatures matched the banned Christmas star technology. "Worse, Admiral. They appear to be spreading." Zektar examined the tactical hologram floating before her command throne. Red markers indicated confirmed Christmas star sightings, scattered across human settlements like a growing infection. Each marker represented a violation of Imperial law, a direct challenge to the cultural purification that had brought order to this sector of the galaxy. "How is this possible?" she asked, her mandibles clicking with irritation. "Every Christmas star facility was destroyed 37 cycles ago. Our records show complete compliance with Cultural Directive 847. Unknown, Admiral. However, intelligence suggests the source may be mobile. The pattern of appearances follows major shipping routes used by human cargo vessels." Zektar's compound eyes focused on a particular cluster of red markers near the Arcturus system. The progression was too organized to be random, too widespread to be the work of a single ship. Someone was systematically reintroducing the banned technology, and they were doing it with considerable skill and planning. "Deploy patrol squadrons to intercept any human vessels in those sectors," she commanded. "Full inspections, complete cargo searches. I want the source of this contamination found and eliminated." But even as she gave the orders, Zektar felt a familiar unease. She had been fighting human insurgencies for decades, and something about this pattern felt different. Most resistance movements struck at military or economic targets. This one seemed focused on something far more dangerous: ideas. Meanwhile, aboard the merchant vessel New Bethany, Captain Elena Vasquez was discovering that carrying Christmas stars had consequences she had never anticipated. Her ship had rendezvoused with Captain Webb's Shepherd Star 6 weeks earlier, trading rare medical supplies for a cargo that officially didn't exist, 47 small stellar arrays and the knowledge of how to make more. "Captain, we have company," her navigation officer called from the bridge. 3 Imperial patrol craft, closing fast. Elena felt her heart skip, but kept her voice steady. "How long until they intercept?" 12 minutes at current approach speed. She looked around her bridge crew, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination on every face. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. Over the past month, they had successfully delivered Christmas stars to 8 different human settlements, watching communities come alive with something that had been missing for decades. "Maria, what's the status on our cargo?" Her chief engineer, Maria Santos, the same young woman who had served aboard Shepherd Star, had joined Elena's crew after word spread through the underground networks. "Stars are secure in the hidden compartments, Captain. The Imperial scanners would need to know exactly what they're looking for to detect them." "And if they do know?" Maria's smile was grim but determined. "Then we make sure the lights keep burning somewhere else." The Imperial patrol ships took positions around New Bethany, their sleek forms dwarfing the converted cargo hauler. Elena had been through inspections before, but never while carrying contraband that could get her entire crew executed for cultural terrorism. The lead patrol craft opened communications, and Admiral Zektar herself appeared on the main screen. Elena tried not to show her surprise. It was unusual for an admiral to personally conduct cargo inspections. "Captain Vasquez," Zektar's translated voice carried the cold authority of absolute power. "Prepare to be boarded. This is a routine inspection for compliance with Imperial cultural directives." "Of course, Admiral," Elena replied with practiced calm. "We're transmitting our manifest now. Standard medical supplies and mining equipment bound for the Kepler colonies." The boarding party arrived within minutes, 12 Imperial soldiers in full combat armor, accompanied by cultural compliance scanners and detention equipment. Elena met them at the airlock, her crew maintaining their stations with the disciplined calm of experienced spacers. The inspection began with mechanical efficiency. Imperial soldiers methodically searched every compartment while their scanners probed for energy signatures that might indicate banned technology. Elena watched them work, her heart pounding but her expression neutral. Then one of the soldiers called out from the cargo bay, "Admiral, we have anomalous readings in Section 7. Elena's blood ran cold. Section 7 housed their legitimate medical supplies, but it was also where Maria had hidden 2 of the smaller Christmas stars, wrapped in shielding that was supposed to be undetectable. Admiral Zektar herself entered the cargo bay, her imposing crystalline form reflecting the harsh lighting as she examined the scanner readings. "These energy signatures are consistent with stellar array technology, Captain Vasquez. Would you care to explain?" Elena felt the moment of truth approaching. She could lie, claim ignorance, hope the shielding would hold. But looking at her crew, seeing the quiet courage in their faces, she made a different choice. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I have something to show you." She led the boarding party to Section 7 and activated the hidden panel. Inside, wrapped in protective foam, were 2 small Christmas stars. Even powered down, they seemed to glow with inner light, their crystalline structures catching and reflecting the cargo bay's illumination. "What you're looking at," Elena said as Imperial weapons trained on her, "is hope. It's the idea that beauty matters more than efficiency. It's the belief that joy is worth preserving even when it serves no practical purpose." Admiral Zektar examined the devices with the cold calculation of a military strategist. "These are weapons of cultural destabilization, Captain. They promote inefficiency, emotional attachment, resistance to proper authority. They must be destroyed." "Must they?" Elena asked, and something in her voice made the Admiral pause. "Let me tell you what I've seen in the past month, Admiral. I've seen human communities that had forgotten how to smile learning to laugh again. I've seen children who had never experienced wonder staring at these lights with joy that made their parents weep. I've seen people remember that they're more than just labor units in your economic system." She gestured to the Christmas stars, their dormant beauty somehow managing to fill the sterile cargo bay with warmth. "Yes, they're inefficient. Yes, they promote emotional attachment, but they also promote something your empire can never understand. The idea that existence itself has value beyond productivity." Admiral Zektar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. In her centuries of military service, she had suppressed dozens of human insurgencies, crushed countless resistance movements. But this was different, if that did. These humans weren't fighting with weapons or sabotage. They were fighting with light, and hope, and the simple act of choosing joy.
You realize, she said slowly, that possession of these devices carries a mandatory death sentence. Alina nodded calmly. We knew the risks when we chose this path. And yet you chose it anyway.
Why? The question seemed to surprise the Admiral herself. In all her years of dealing with human rebels, she had never asked why they were willing to die for their causes. She had simply assumed they were irrational, driven by the kind of emotional instability that made humans unreliable citizens of the Empire. Elena smiled, and for a moment, Admiral Zektar saw something she had never noticed before, the quiet radiance that came from a life lived with purpose, the inner light that made humans dangerous not because they were strong, but because they were impossible to truly defeat. Because someone has to remember, Elena said simply. Someone has to carry forward the idea that existence can be beautiful, that love is more powerful than fear, that hope can survive any darkness if we're willing to guard its light. She looked around at her crew, seeing the same serene determination on every face. We're not trying to overthrow your empire, Admiral. We're not planning rebellions or building weapons. We're just trying to keep something beautiful alive in an ugly universe. Admiral Zektar studied the Christmas stars with renewed interest. They were crude compared to Imperial technology, inefficient by any reasonable standard. Yet something about them, perhaps the worn quality of their light, perhaps the obvious care that had gone into their creation, stirred something in her that she had thought long dead. My orders are clear, she said finally. These devices must be confiscated and destroyed. Your crew must be detained for cultural violation trials. Elena nodded acceptance, but then added quietly, May I ask you something, Admiral? In all your years of service, in all the efficiency and order you've helped create, have you ever experienced joy? Not satisfaction at a task completed or pride in duty fulfilled. Real joy. The kind that makes you grateful to be alive for no practical reason at all. The question hit Admiral Zektar like a physical blow. She tried to remember the last time she had felt something beyond duty, beyond the cold satisfaction of efficient order. The memory that surfaced was ancient. Herself as a larva, barely hatched, watching the first sunrise on her homeworld through compound eyes that had never seen light before. She had felt something then, something that had no strategic value, no practical application, something that had simply been beautiful. Take them into custody, she ordered her soldiers, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. As Elena and her crew were led away, they began to sing. It started with Maria Santos, her young voice carrying the melody of Silent Night in the Spanish her grandmother had taught her. One by one, the others joined in, their voices harmonizing in the sterile corridors of the Imperial patrol ship. Admiral Zektar listened to their song as she examined the confiscated Christmas stars and found herself remembering things she had spent centuries trying to forget. The way light looked different when you weren't analyzing its tactical applications. The way music could touch something deeper than thought. The way love could make even death seem like a small price to pay. She held one of the Christmas stars up to the light, watching the way its crystalline structure caught and reflected the harsh illumination of her ship. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would look like when activated, filling a dark space with gentle warmth. Admiral, her aide approached cautiously. Your orders regarding the prisoners? Zektar set the Christmas star down carefully, her decision made. But as she prepared to speak, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Her tactical display lit up with urgent alerts. Dozens of new Christmas star signatures appearing simultaneously across 17 different systems. The light was spreading faster than they could contain it. Admiral, her communications officer reported with barely concealed amazement. We're receiving transmissions on the same frequency as the Bethlehem's Rest broadcast. Hundreds of them, from ships and settlements across the Outer Rim. They're all playing the same message. Elena's voice filled the bridge, broadcast from countless sources across the galaxy. The light is our legacy. Let it burn bright. Christmas is not dead while we remember what it means. Admiral Zektar stared at her tactical display, watching red markers multiply across the star charts like a constellation being born. She had been ordered to stop a single ship carrying contraband. Instead, she had discovered that the light had already spread beyond any possibility of containment. The humans had won this battle before she had even realized it was being fought. Emperor Vexthal stood in his throne room's observation chamber, watching the galaxy burn with 10,000 points of light. Each dot on the vast holographic display represented a Christmas star, and they were spreading through human space like wildfire through dry grass. What had begun as a single act of defiance at Bethlehem's Rest had become something unprecedented in the Empire's history, a revolution powered not by weapons, but by hope. Status report, he commanded, his forearms gesturing with barely controlled fury. Admiral Zektar materialized via hologram, her crystalline form somehow different than it had been weeks earlier. There was something in her posture, a subtle change that the Emperor couldn't quite identify but instinctively distrusted. The situation has deteriorated beyond our initial projections, Excellence, she reported with military precision. Christmas stars are now active in over 300 human settlements. Our interdiction efforts have resulted in the capture of 47 vessels, but for every ship we stop, 5 more seem to take its place. Then deploy more ships, Vexthal snarled. Increase patrol frequencies. Institute martial law if necessary. Excellence. Zektar paused, and in that hesitation, the Emperor heard something that made his compound eyes narrow with suspicion. I must inform you that our recent actions have had unexpected consequences. The tactical display shifted, showing a new cluster of data points. But these weren't Christmas stars. They were Imperial vessels, ships that had gone silent or simply disappeared from their assigned patrol routes. 12 of our patrol squadrons have failed to report in the past week, Zektar continued. When we investigated, we found their ships intact, but abandoned at various human settlements. The crews left behind messages stating they were refusing to continue enforcement operations. Emperor Vexthal felt something he had rarely experienced in his long reign. Genuine surprise. Imperial forces are deserting to join human rebels? Not exactly joining them, Excellence. The humans aren't building an army or stockpiling weapons. They're doing something far more dangerous. Zektar's image flickered slightly as she adjusted her transmission parameters. They're sharing their culture. Teaching our people about concepts like joy, wonder, voluntary kindness. Several of our officers reported that they had experienced what humans call Christmas spirit and could no longer participate in its suppression. The Emperor's crystalline form reflected the chamber's harsh lighting in fragmented rainbows as he processed this information. In his 1,000-year reign, he had faced military rebellions, economic disruptions, even attempted assassinations. But an enemy that converted soldiers simply by showing them happiness? This was entirely outside his experience. Show me, he commanded. The holographic display shifted to show surveillance footage from the mining settlement of New Hope, where Admiral Zektar had recently conducted an inspection. The Emperor watched Imperial soldiers standing in a simple community hall, their weapons lowered, as human children showed them handmade ornaments crafted from recycled materials. One particular scene made him pause the playback. A massive Imperial warrior, bred for combat and conditioned for absolute obedience, gently accepting a small carved wooden star from a human child who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The soldier's compound eyes were actually glistening with what appeared to be tears of joy. Explain this, Vexthal demanded. Admiral Zektar's image remained steady, but there was something in her voice that the Emperor had never heard before. Warmth. The child spent 3 days carving that star, Excellence. She used materials salvaged from her family's ration containers, worked by candlelight after her mandatory study periods, all so she could give something beautiful to someone who had shown her kindness. Kindness? The word came out as a hiss of contempt. Imperial soldiers are not trained for kindness. They are trained for efficiency, order, absolute compliance with authority. Yes, Zektar agreed quietly. But humans seem to possess the ability to awaken qualities in others that even the most thorough conditioning cannot suppress. This child saw something in that soldier. Perhaps the memory of what he had been before his military conditioning. Perhaps simply the potential for goodness that exists in all sentient beings. And she chose to nurture it. The Emperor studied his most trusted admiral with growing concern. Zektar had been his instrument of cultural purification for over 3 centuries, ruthlessly efficient in suppressing exactly this kind of emotional contamination. Now she spoke of human customs with something that sounded dangerously close to admiration. Admiral, he said carefully, you were exposed to these Christmas stars during your inspection operations. Are you compromised? For a long moment, Zektar was silent. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of someone who had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Excellence, I have served the Empire for 400 years. I have conquered worlds, suppressed rebellions, eliminated countless threats to imperial order. I believed, as we all do, that the Empire's way was the only way, that efficiency, productivity, and absolute compliance were the highest goals any civilization could achieve.
She paused, and the Emperor saw something in her expression that filled him with dread, the look of someone who had found truth and could no longer unsee it.
But these humans showed me something I had never experienced, she continued. They showed me joy that serves no practical purpose, love that expects no return, hope that persists despite impossible odds. And, in experiencing these things, I discovered that the Empire, for all its order and efficiency, has never created anything beautiful. Beauty is irrelevant, Vexthal snapped. Order is what matters, productivity, control. Is it? Zektar asked, and in that simple question the Emperor heard the echo of rebellion. Excellence. When did you last experience wonder? When did you last see something that made you grateful simply to be alive? When did you last choose to do something kind purely because it would make another being happy? The questions hit like physical blows. The Emperor found himself reaching back through centuries of memory, searching for moments of genuine joy, of beauty appreciated for its own sake, rather than its strategic value. The memories were ancient, buried under layers of imperial conditioning and a relentless pursuit of power. You have been compromised, he declared, severing the connection. But as Admiral Zektar's image faded, Emperor Vexthal found himself alone with questions that refused to be dismissed. He moved to his private chamber's viewport, looking out at the galactic core where billions of beings lived under imperial rule. Order, efficiency, productivity, these had been the pillars of his reign, the foundation of the greatest empire in galactic history. Yet something nagged at him, a memory so old he had almost forgotten it existed. He had been young then, barely ascended to the throne, standing in the crystal gardens of his homeworld, watching the aurora dance across polar skies. He had felt something in that moment, something that had no strategic value, no practical application, pure wonder at the beauty of existence itself. When had he stopped seeing auroras as anything more than atmospheric electromagnetic phenomena? His private communications array chimed with an incoming transmission. The Emperor expected another military report, but instead found himself looking at an elderly human woman seated in what appeared to be a modest dwelling. Behind her, a small Christmas star cast gentle light across walls decorated with children's drawings and handmade ornaments. Your Imperial Excellence, she said with surprising calm. My name is Margaret Chen. Commander Sarah Chen was my daughter. The Emperor's mandibles clicked with recognition. The woman whose defiance had started this entire crisis, whose final message was now being broadcast from 1,000 different sources across the galaxy. I wanted you to know, Margaret continued, her weathered face peaceful despite everything the Empire had taken from her, that Sarah would have been proud to see how her sacrifice has grown into something beautiful. You tried to extinguish one light, and the universe responded by kindling thousands. Your daughter was a terrorist and a fool, Vexthal replied, though his voice lacked its usual venom. She died for meaningless sentiment. Margaret smiled, the expression transforming her features with the kind of radiance that no amount of imperial conditioning could manufacture. She died for love, Your Excellence. For the idea that beauty and joy and wonder are not meaningless, but are perhaps the only things that give existence true meaning. Behind her, the Christmas star pulsed gently, its light seeming to reach across the vast distance between them, to touch something the Emperor had thought dead forever.
You have built an empire of incredible order and efficiency, Margaret acknowledged.
But tell me, in all your centuries of rule, have you ever created anything that made someone weep with joy? Have you ever built something that had no purpose except to be beautiful? Have you ever made a choice that served no goal except to increase the amount of love in the universe? The questions hung in the silence of his private chamber like accusations. The Emperor thought of his great works, the administrative systems that governed trillions of beings with mechanical precision, the military forces that had conquered countless worlds, the economic networks that extracted resources and productivity with ruthless efficiency. All of it functional, all of it practical, none of it beautiful. What do you want from me? He asked, surprised by the vulnerability in his own voice. Nothing, Margaret replied simply. Christmas isn't about taking or demanding or conquering. It's about giving. About choosing to create light in dark places, hope in desperate situations, love where none existed before. She stood slowly, moving to a small Christmas star and placing her hand on its warm surface. Your Excellence, you have the power to end this resistance with a single command. You could order the destruction of every human settlement, eliminate every Christmas star, silence every voice raised in song. The Emperor nodded grimly. That had indeed been his plan. But you also have the power to do something unprecedented in galactic history, Margaret continued. You could choose to let beauty exist alongside efficiency. you could discover what happens when an empire built on control learns to embrace joy. The transmission ended, leaving Emperor Vexthal alone with the most dangerous idea he had ever encountered: the possibility that there might be something more important than power. He returned to his observation chamber, studying the display of Christmas star locations that now covered a significant portion of human space. Each light represented a community that had chosen hope over despair, joy over efficiency, love over control. And with each passing day, the lights were multiplying. "Computer," he commanded, "show me statistical analysis of productivity in systems with confirmed Christmas star activity." The data that appeared surprised him. Rather than the predicted drops in efficiency, many settlements were reporting increased cooperation, higher morale, and improved overall performance. Humans working for joy, it seemed, were more productive than humans working from fear. "Show me crime statistics for the same regions." Again, the unexpected crime rates had dropped significantly in communities celebrating Christmas. When people felt valued and connected to something beautiful, they were less likely to turn to destructive behaviors. "Show me." He paused, struggling with a question he had never thought to ask. "Show me happiness indices." The display shifted to show data that the Empire had always collected but never considered relevant. Across every system where Christmas stars burned, sentient beings reported higher levels of satisfaction, stronger community connections, and greater sense of purpose in their lives. An empire of happy citizens was not something Emperor Vexthal had ever imagined possible. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The Christmas lights weren't weakening human communities, they were strengthening them. As he stood in his observation chamber, surrounded by the instruments of absolute power, Emperor Vexthal made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He activated his Imperial communication array, preparing to broadcast across every system under his rule. But for the first time in his 1,000-year reign, he found himself uncertain of what to say. "How do you tell an empire built on control that you've decided to try something unprecedented? How do you admit that everything you thought you knew about power and order might be wrong?" In the end, he chose simplicity, the same kind of honest truth that had made Margaret Chen so powerful despite her apparent helplessness. "Citizens of the Empire," he began, his voice carrying across countless star systems to trillions of waiting beings. "Effective immediately. The prohibition on Christmas celebrations is rescinded. Any being wishing to create or display Christmas stars may do so without fear of prosecution." The words felt strange on his translated vocal cords, but he pressed on. "Furthermore, I hereby decree that beauty, joy, and voluntary expressions of love are to be considered valuable contributions to imperial society. We have built an empire of incredible efficiency. Perhaps it is time to discover what we might create if we also chose to build one capable of wonder." The message ended, and across the galaxy something unprecedented began to happen. Imperial soldiers laid down their weapons and asked human civilians to teach them about Christmas. Worlds that had known only efficiency for decades began to remember what celebration felt like. And in the void between stars, lights began to appear. Not just Christmas stars now, but countless other expressions of beauty and hope, and the simple desire to make existence more wonderful than it had been before. Emperor Vexthal remained in his observation chamber, watching the lights multiply across his domain. For the first time in 1,000 years, he felt something he had thought himself incapable of experiencing: curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. Not as a strategic calculation, but as a genuine sense of wonder. The last light of Christmas had become the first light of something entirely new. An empire that valued both order and joy, efficiency and beauty, power and love. And across the galaxy, in communities both human and alien, beings who had forgotten how to hope began to remember that some things were indeed too precious to surrender. The light burned on, no longer alone, no longer guarded by a few brave souls. Against impossible odds, now it burned in countless hearts, tended by countless hands. Proof that even the mightiest empire could learn to choose love over fear when shown the way by those brave enough to stand firm and guard the light.